If I had to describe the opening scene of One Punch Man in one word, that word would be strong. Boom. But before we get into that, I would like to thank my wonderful patrons, Data52 and Soren, my Discord moderator Tokay55, as well as Benjamin I1 for suggesting One Punch Man for Red Hot Go. If there is another show that you would like me to check out, please let me know in the comments. One Punch Man is another show that I knew by reputation before starting. I knew that it was a subversive comedy about a superhero who wins every fight in a single punch, and that did sound kind of cool. And as stated earlier, the opening scene is probably the best I've seen from any show that I've covered for this series. It starts with a monster that looks like something out of Dragon Ball, not that I would know, causing devastating destruction around a city, ending human lives and even defeating a couple of superheroes in the process. We then get our protagonist watching this unfold on TV who nonchalantly says, "Guess I'll go." Nonchalant is the perfect word to describe Saitama, as he introduces himself as someone who is a hero for fun, and responds to the dastardly villain's monologue by destroying them in a single punch. His devastation at ending the fight so anticlimactically was absolutely hilarious. It's not every day that I laugh out loud at an anime, but Saitama's frustration that he had vanquished yet another foe without much effort was a joy to behold. His origin story was also well executed. I mainly noticed the stark contrast between the goofy villain that looks like a character from a strange doujinshi and the sickeningly gory scenes they leave in their wake. However, I might as well give away now that I think the first 3 episodes have already peaked by this point. For starters, the personal investment in the story is non-existent after this. When the colossal villain wipes out a dozen city blocks with the flick of the wrist, it lacks the discomfort you'd get from something shot closer to the ground, the understanding of stakes you'd get from something more personal to the main character, and the building of tension from a story that you don't already know the ending of. That was another big problem from the first 3 episodes. It was so predictable that I called all the subversions before they were revealed. Kill the man on your shoulder? He's going to kill the wrong one. Is Saitama getting invested in a fight? It must be a dream. Saitama getting emotional over a villain's threat? It's over something mundane. That last situation, the one in which Saitama responds to a villain's threat to kill thousands of people with frustration that he is missing a grocery store sale, raises a question. What is Saitama's relationship to the citizens of his local city? Okay, you could argue that he was confident enough in that particular fight to not have to worry about the threats, but he seemingly has a blasé attitude towards mass death anyway. Like when that Colossus villain shows up, it's made clear that every step it takes destroys multiple city blocks, presumably filled with people. Still, Saitama waits on his shoulder until it is time for the villain's brother to notice him. When he defeats the Colossus and it falls backwards onto a populated area, Saitama can't muster up any more than a simple oops as a PA announces that an entire city, also likely full of people, has been destroyed. Now, I'm no stranger to shows that feature mass death. Still, I'd prefer it if the protagonists were either always motivated to save lives or always indifferent to the civilian populace. As it stands, it switches from one to the other depending on what the showrunners want. I do like the idea of Saitama being a hero who lacks challenge in his career as a superhero. How that lack of challenge translates to a lack of passion, which then leads to a state that could almost be considered depression. The show also presents this visually, showing Saitama as a shonen-style mad hero when he's fired up, and a dozy egghead appearance when he is understimulated. Sometimes the subversion of tropes is done well, like when Saitama gets that determined look in his eye over a mosquito, or when he and Genos flee right after a fight to hit the grocery store. But more often than not, the moments that try to poke fun at superhero tropes are what I will henceforth refer to as performative subversion. That is to say, the narrative acts as though it is subverting a trope, even though in reality it's just indulging in that trope. The prime example that comes to mind is when Genos spends about 2 minutes explaining his origin story. The quote-unquote subversive aspect of this scene is that Saitama is bored and frustrated with how long the story is taking. But that's not a real subversion. I still have to sit through 2 minutes of spoken exposition. A proper subversion would have been if the origin story was mundane, or Saitama had succeeded in preventing the exposition dump. As it stands, this is just fully engaging in a trope and sarcastically rolling your eyes at it. That said, I do like Genos. Despite his broody demeanor and predictably generic backstory, Genos' interactions with Saitama are always earnest. Some standout moments include when he asks to be Saitama's disciple, when he calls out Saitama for being full of crap, and when he encourages Saitama to make a mad dash to the grocery store to take advantage of the sale he was so devastated to miss. Ultimately, I left the first 3 episodes of One Punch Man feeling conflicted. While the subversive premise and introductory arcs were incredible, the show is brought down by its predictable narrative and failed attempts to subvert superhero cliches. With a heavy heart from ice cold to red hot, I give One Punch Man a rating of lukewarm. The show has enough goodwill for a few more episodes, but I don't think I'll be finishing this one if it doesn't provide more than performative subversion or further endear me to the characters. That is all for this episode of Red Hot Go. I'd like to thank my patrons Orion Tran, Lars Espen, Data52, Jaman5, Shark, Pixcalibur, Alberto Cruz, Tyler Bennett, Tenka, Jeremy Bashik, Fireclaw and Soran. If you too would like to support the channel further, please consider becoming a patron yourself. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.